You first, don't forget.
Yes.
Yeah, go on.
Well, welcome. It's good to be with you this evening for the third one of our reflections in Holy Week. I'm Anne, and this is Phill, and it's great to be here.
A particularly warm welcome if you're joining us from the stream. If you're on YouTube, it's great to have you with us. I hope you'll be able to rest and relax into your time with us.
So our focus this evening is going to be on some verses from Matthew chapter 26. So you might want to, if you're at home, you might want to get your Bible. But you also might want to get some bread and wine or something similar, because our focus is going to be on the significance of bread and wine, based on those verses that we're going to read in Matthew, but also looking a little bit broader.
And the whole of this evening, for the half an hour, our focus is going to be bringing us closer to Jesus as we reflect on the bread and the wine. So just keep that in mind, that we're trying to come closer to Jesus.
So I'm going to start by reading the key verses that we've based the reflection on, which is Matthew chapter 26, reading from verse 26 to 29. And this is Jesus having his last supper with his friends. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, gave thanks and broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat, this is my body." Then he took the cup, gave thanks, and offered it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom." So we're going to begin by having a focus on bread, because bread is referred to just under 500 times in the Bible, and it's a very powerful symbol. As followers of Jesus, when we take part in the communion service, we literally hold a piece of bread in our hands. And as Jesus commanded us, we remember that that piece of bread that has been broken off a loaf symbolises for us his broken body that was broken for us on the cross. And we eat it as we remember that that's where our forgiveness comes, and that's where our life in Jesus comes. And so as we eat that bread, we look back to Jesus' death, but we look inside ourselves to his presence within us, and we look forward to his return and eating that wedding feast with him in heaven. So it's a looking back, a looking inwards, and a looking forward. And I've picked out three themes that bread is seen as symbolising in the Bible, but there are many others. Bread is seen as God's provision and his gift to each one of us. In Exodus, when the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness and hungry and tired, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they didn't know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It's the bread the Lord has given you to eat." Now, it didn't look anything like the bread we have here, but it was the bread that was going to nourish them until they reached the promised land. Bread is also seen as God's presence. And part of the instructions that were given to the Israelites when they were in the wilderness was that the priests were to make 12 loaves each week. They weighed about 5 pounds each, these loaves, so they were huge. And they were a sign of God's provision and his presence for the 12 tribes of Israel. And they were to place these loaves of bread on what was called the table of the presence in the tabernacle, and it symbolised God's covenant relationship with his people. It says in Numbers chapter 4, "Over the table of the presence they are to spread a blue cloth and put on it plates, dishes and bowls, and jars for drink offerings, and the bread that is continually there is to remain on it." So bread symbolises God's provision and gift to us, and it symbolises his presence, and finally it symbolises life. Bread is life-giving. Even the name of the place, Bethlehem, means house of bread. So the place where Jesus was born, where life on this earth came to him, was in the house of bread. So bread is life-giving. Jesus refers to himself as the bread of life. In the Gospels, just after the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000, where that little bit of bread was miraculously made to feed 5,000 men and then however many women and children, Jesus goes on to speak that he's come not just to feed people's physical needs, but their spiritual needs. And here we have the most amazing verses that follow, where Jesus speaks of himself in John chapter 6. "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world." So Jesus came not mainly to give bread, but to be bread. To be that source of life for us, spiritual food, soul food, the bread that eventually would be broken for us and shared with the world. So in the Passover meal, the Jews use unleavened bread, much like this matzo. Very different to our bread. They use unleavened bread because it symbolises the night that the Israelites fled in such a rush from Egypt that they had to take the bread dough wrapped up in a cloth before the yeast had been added to it. But as followers of Jesus, we see the bread that we take in communion not as representing that, the night when they fled, but we see the bread as actually representing Jesus. So bread is that universal food that sustains life, but Jesus is the spiritual bread that gives us real spiritual life and brings us into relationship, into that intimacy with God and into community with each other. It's what we do as family, it's what we do as friends. We break bread, we eat. It's all about relationship. It's all about what we do with each other and with God. And I think it's interesting that in the Lord's Prayer, one of the key lines is, "Give us today our daily bread." And I've always thought, until preparing this, that that was about asking for our practical needs to be met. But I'd like us to pray it now, and follow me as I say the words, to think of it as being asking for Jesus, asking for the presence of Jesus, because he said, "I am the bread." So let's finish this little section by saying the words of the Lord's Prayer together. And let's picture in our minds that we are asking for the presence of Jesus to enter our lives once again. And as we actually focus and think in maybe a bigger way than we've allowed ourselves to think before, what Jesus meant when he said, "I am the bread of life." So let's say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen.
We're going to, in a moment, hand out the bread. Please do take a piece, and I'll encourage you to eat it sometime during the next 4 minutes or so. But what we're going to do is we'll have the slide on the screen. It will just give you a few indications of what to do. I encourage you to taste it. So if I put the slide up, to focus it on it, taste it, reflect on its meaning, and let it draw you closer to Jesus. I'm going to play some music quietly in the background. This is courtesy of Pete Wheeler, who wrote this piece of music. It's a nice reflective piece of music. We've got about 4 minutes or so just to focus on the bread. It's a little bit of a bigger piece than you would normally have on a Sunday. Take your time over it, savour it, enjoy it. And we've also got some gluten-free. Shirley's brought that. If anyone would prefer that, please do let Shirley know. Anne, can you go and pass the bread around, please? We'll now turn our attention to the wine, and I'm just going to tell you a few stories, tell you about a book I've read as well. But I remember, it must be 10 years ago or so, it was a particular wedding anniversary, I can't remember which one it was, but our children had saved up and bought us a meal at the Savoy restaurant in London, which was a Gordon Ramsay restaurant. And I remember it very vividly. There was a piano with someone playing a grand piano, and we went in and we were seated at this lovely table. It was in the back left-hand corner of a room. We were right at the corner. I remember it vividly. And the wine waiter came, and we were looking for the cheapest bottle of wine we could find and so on. A lot more expensive than we usually pay. But I remember saying to the wine waiter, "What's the most expensive bottle of wine you've got here?" He said, "Well, we've got a bottle that would cost you about £10,000. I don't know whether it was a Chateau Lafite or whatever it was. And I said, "Tell me what it's I can't tell you what it's like," he said, "because I've never tried it, obviously. But if we sold it, if someone came in and bought the wine, they probably wouldn't drink it. They would take it home and they would put it in their cellar, and they'd be able to boast that they'd got a Chateau Lafite 1962 or whatever it was, I don't know." And he said, "Actually, it probably wouldn't taste any better than the wine you've ordered already. It's just that it's so rare," etc. I remember that vividly. I remember also when the waiters came and served our food, whenever they passed something, I think it's always with their right hand, they would put their arm behind their back, their left arm behind their back as they leaned forward. And they did it all the time. It was fascinating to watch. I read this book several years ago called The Supper of the Lamb, and it's by a man called Robert Farrar Capon, who's a chef, but he's also a monk as well. And he goes into great detail about all sorts of things in the book. There's a whole chapter on how to cut an onion up. There's another whole chapter on the perfect corkscrew. But this chapter is about wine, and I just want to read to you a couple of things from it. He has a very different way of looking at things. He's talking about the season as the season goes through for a grapevine. And he describes under summer heat, sun fierce upon the hills, in the grape now, water, glucose, fructose, tannin, acid, all beneath the thin firmament on which the spirit's brooding leaves behind a bloom of yeast. Saccharomyces ellipsoideus, the triumphant, the thumbprint of the Lord and giver of life. And he then goes on to say that the grape is an amazing creation. He talks about the way God not only created the world many, many years ago, that we read about in the beginning of Genesis, but also that God is still creating. Each day he creates. And he describes this about the grape. Each thing at every moment becomes the delight of his hand, the apple of his eye. The bloom of yeast lies upon the grape skins year after year because he likes it. C6H12O6 equals 2C2H5OH plus 2CO2 is a dependable process because every September he says, "That was nice. Do it again." And the point he's trying to make is that everything needed to make beautiful wine is in the grape. You've got all the sugars, all the tannins, all the acids, etc. inside the grape. You've got the grape skin, which gives you the colour of the wine. And then on the outside, you've got this covering of natural yeast, which is the same yeast that ferments all the contents of the grape into wine. I found that absolutely fascinating. In the Bible, we read about wine, don't we? In the Passover celebration, Anne mentioned the bread there. There are 4 cups of wine, and it's a celebration of God rescuing the people out of Egypt. At the wedding, at Jesus' first miracle in Cana, he turned, I don't know whether you've ever worked this out, but he turned 180 gallons 180 gallons of washing water into the finest claret. 180 gallons. That is a picture of abundance, isn't it? And then in the communion service that we remember, it says Jesus took the wine and he said, "This is my blood." So in conclusion, really, about the wine symbols divine grace, God giving, God creating, and it symbolises abundant blessings. So in a moment we're going to have a taste of wine, and just try to remember that it's a symbol of divine grace and a symbol of abundant blessings. So Anne, would you, as I get the next slide there, thank you. If we can again take the small glass of wine and drink it whenever you want during the next 3 or 4 minutes or so. Take a good smell of it. It's called a bouquet. Waft it round in the glass. Take a smell of it. Yeah. Take it into your mouth. Wash it around your mouth. Don't spit it out, please. And if you're able to, swallow it as well. But let's taste the wine. Let's reflect on its meaning, and let's let it draw closer to Jesus. Again, I'm going to put some music on. We're coming towards the end of our time together this evening. I don't know about you, but I found it really helpful actually, just to take my time over eating the piece of bread and drinking the wine. Often in communion it's straight back, and you're on to the next thing, as it were. So I found it really, really helpful. I was surprised by that, taking the time. We're going to finish the stream in a moment, but before we do that, I'd like just to show you, for those of you at home on the stream watching, unfortunately you're not going to be able to listen to the song that we're going to play in a moment because of copyright issues. We're not allowed to broadcast it, but can I encourage you, if you're at home watching, we're finishing about now, so we're just before just before the half an hour. Please do search for the song Communion by Brooke Lidgerwood. It's a beautiful song, absolutely beautiful song. We're going to listen to it together here after the stream has finished. But if you're at home, please do search on YouTube for that song Communion. There's various versions of it. There's a live version. You can find the lyrics actually in the drop down, or the version we're going to use is it's not a live video, but actually you can see the lyrics on the screen. And I think as well Al has managed to put the lyrics into the stream tonight, and hopefully the URL, so you should be able to find that easily. But we'll say goodbye, shall we?
We will. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Home. And we wish you a very happy Easter. You're very welcome if you're watching from home, and also you here in person as well. Please do join us on Saturday. Moore, where we are now, Moore's going to be open in the morning from 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock. And we're serving coffee and tea and cake and bacon sandwiches. So please do come and join us at Moore in Parton Road, and also at the Canal Centre, Canal Society function room where Broughton Church normally meets. We'll be meeting there at 10:30 on Sunday morning for a bit of a celebration with some cake as well, I believe. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us on the stream, and we'll say goodbye now.